Well, we've arrived at the end of our first lecture series, and before I finish my story about my marketing research presentation to a rather skeptical lawyer/manager, let me recap what we've covered. Now, first of all, you probably noticed in a lot of this, I've been giving plenty of advice, and that's going to continue as we go through these lectures. That's because, for me, marketing research is a day-to-day reality. This is not a field in which I have an academic interest. It's a field in which I have a practical interest. I am academically interested, but I am constantly learning about and reshaping and reinterpreting my view of what marketing research is, and part of my goal as your instructor is to help you to do the same. I want you to walk out of this class with a perspective that's different than you walked in with. And so we have a picture here. It says advice 50 cents, good advice $2. Well, and the joke's for free. Well, let's kind of think about our class that way. I'm going to try to give you good advice, not just regular advice, and I'll throw in a few lighter moments here and there. Now, what have we learned in this lecture series? I want to review and just make sure that you take away the big points. I don't want you to just walk away thinking about Batman and Superman. I want you to think about the bigger stuff, okay? First of all, marketing research is not inherently scientific, and we have to be careful to ensure that any work, qualitative or quantitative, doesn't become pseudoscience. And if you take nothing else away from this class, I want you to remember that point. We're using the tools of the scientific method, and we should be approaching every research project with a certain amount of scientific rigor. The reason that our work as marketing researchers, and qualitative researchers in particular, tends to be discounted by our colleagues in the sciences is because we often don't apply a scientific framework to what we do. We have an obligation to follow the scientific method and apply good research methods, and I encourage every one of you, whether you're an MMR student or MBA student, to cling to that ideal no matter what your bosses or clients demand of you in your careers. You will be better researchers or better users of research for it. Second, we've learned that qualitative research is a label for the intent of a method of inquiry, but not merely the type of data collection we're using. Open-ended responses in a quantitative survey should not be labeled as qualitative data any more than the scales in a qualitative study should be labeled as quantitative. Qualitative research is about a deep understanding of the perspectives and behaviors of individuals, increasing your understanding, making it deeper, and then constructing or refining your broader hypotheses or theory as a result. Okay, the intent is really important. 3. Qualitative and quantitative research come from different sources, but they aren't enemies. They're like two sides of a coin. They're like long-lost twins. They're like Batman and Superman. And that's the part I want you to remember. Not all about Batman and Superman, but how those two characters are very similar to how qualitative and quantitative research play out. A good researcher uses both of these toolkits to provide a body of work for research, and it's always worth recommending to your end users that both styles be used, either simultaneously or one after another. If you can have Batman and Superman, why not have them both? Finally, theory and practice are two very different arenas, and we have to be careful that we have a good balance of both. Okay, and again, clients, costs, and timing really get in the way of a good scientific method. So make sure that you arm yourself with a lot of good training, and that you also are very aware of what's going on in fields that are similar to ours, so that you can constantly be improving your understanding of how research can be done and arming yourself with best practices that can improve the work that you're doing. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed this lecture series, and we have one more thing to talk about, and that is the story that I've been telling you. Let me tell you something about that coffee, I said to the man. The coffee you've been drinking fits in a 12-ounce cup. It's made using about 3 tablespoons of ground coffee and brewed with water that's somewhere between 195 and 205 degrees Fahrenheit, just slightly below boiling to keep the flavor from degrading. It's got somewhere between 200 and 300 milligrams of caffeine in it, which is enough to keep you active for an afternoon. And if I were to delve into it further with just a few minutes of research, I could tell you the cost per ounce for that coffee. I could tell you how it compares on a flavor index compared to other popular brands. And I could tell you how popular that particular brand is among the people that work here. I can tell you how many times that coffee is consumed in your office. And with little more time and research, I might even be able to tell you which employees are most likely to consume it. But here's what I can't tell you. I can't tell you why you drink that coffee, or why anybody does. I can't tell you how that coffee makes you feel, or how that aroma triggers memories in your mind that might have positive or negative associations that are deeply personal for you. I can't tell you why you'd rather have a cup of coffee than a cup of tea, or a can of soda, or a Red Bull. I can't tell you if coffee is part of your daily routine, or if it's just something you grab when you're feeling run down. With the kind of data you're telling me that you trust, I can tell you everything you'd want to know about how people consume that brand and style of coffee, but I'd be at a loss to tell you why. And that why, that's important, because it's what I need to know if I'm in the business of selling you that coffee and I want to make you stick with my brand. The insights I need to acquire aren't going to come from a statistical analysis of who you are. It comes from some scales I've developed. They're going to come from listening to you and people like you talk about that coffee and why it's something you choose to drink. The deeper my understanding of that, the better I can make sure that my coffee is the brand that you drink. Now look, the data that we collected for the study that I've been presenting today are just like that. We talked to 25 people who explained why they possess the attitudes they have towards you as a service provider, and we found some commonality in who they are as individuals, and how they feel about you as an organization, and how they might be persuaded to walk in your doors and use your services. We didn't need to learn about their transactional data or their ratings towards any of the various aspects of your business or their relative satisfaction with your branding, because those things don't offer any explanatory power to us if we don't understand why they have those attitudes and where those ideas are coming from. You can question all day long whether we spoke to the right people, whether we introduced too much bias in who we picked, or whether the questions were asked in a way that led them to certain answers. We encourage that kind of thinking, though, because we as researchers ask all those questions ourselves when we're designing and implementing these studies. And we follow good research practices to minimize those flaws and maximize the usefulness and truth behind the data. Assuming we did our job right, assuming that we heard from those 25 people makes sense and reflects reality, you can absolutely trust what you've heard here, because the people we spoke to were all individuals who somehow managed to express extremely consistent points of view in many areas without having the benefit of knowing each other or hearing each other speak. In essence, if we asked 25 individuals to describe a cup of coffee, they wouldn't come back telling us about soda or apple juice or tea. They'd talk about coffee, how it makes them feel, what they like best about it, how they make it better. And while in this particular study we were asking them about something a little less tangible than coffee, we still got the same sorts of information that can help you to be better as an organization. The man was surprised at my response. And while I wish I could tell you that he immediately leapt up and showed a new understanding for qualitative research, he instead got very quiet and told me to continue the presentation. His questioning for the rest of that session was less aggressive, and I could tell that he was deep in thought, not just about the data that we were sharing, but about its true meaning. Now, I hadn't persuaded him yet that qualitative research was something he could trust. But what I was surprised to learn in the months that followed was that he had become a very big fan of some of the insights from the study I'd presented, often quoting comments from it, from what we learned, and asking others in his organization if they had any data that could go along with it. And the next time I presented qualitative research to him, he was far more engaged and focused on understanding what it had to say than on challenging me as a presenter. My explanation hadn't made him feel that quantitative research was any less useful than qualitative research, but it had made him think much more carefully about discounting qualitative research. And to me, that was like watching someone who'd always seen the world in black and white tones suddenly begin to realize that yes, that variation that we see sometimes isn't just another shade of gray. It's an entire spectrum of colors that make the world more vivid, more wondrous, more thoughtful, and more exciting. And that's what I hope that this class will do for you. Thank you.